Hello and welcome to NewsReal with Joe and Neil.
I'm Joe.
I'm Neil, and it's December already.
How'd that happen?
I don't know. The years just flew by. This week we're going to be discussing the protests in France, which is pretty crazy now. I think it's finally caught media attention globally. Also the other big thing last week, big in a way I suppose, was the border incident in Crimea. We'll be touching on that. The G20 Summit in Argentina. And hopefully as well we'll get on to some updates in the Russiagate nothing burger as it plumbs new depths of
nothingness,
disbelievability. Okay, so in France, la Révolution s'est recommencée. It seems there's a revolution in the air. Speak normal, okay.
Speak normal, will you?
Okay, so the revolution has started and it's being televised. It has and it hasn't. I mean, this is a new recent movement, began on November 17th. It's 2 weeks old now, and they've been going on non-stop like every day in many towns, usually just in the big cities, but even in smaller towns. And every weekend it flares right up because, of course, people aren't working then, so they participate. The last 2 weekends in Paris been crazy. Major riots. You've probably seen now the scenes at the Arc de Triomphe, the centre of Paris, yesterday. As of yesterday evening, 92 people were injured there, 14 of which were police officers, gendarmes, the riot police, and some 205 people were arrested. Who's responsible for that? Protesters or police?
For the arrests?
Well, the violence, I suppose.
Well, these kind of protests, you have to assume the high likelihood, after certainly when they go on for a little while, the high likelihood that there's some kind of agent provocateurs, which is quintessentially French, obviously, since...
What's the French for agent provocateur?
Both those words are French. So these are plainclothes policemen pretending to be protesters, go in and, wreck the place. You have to assume that that's the case always, but not necessarily that, completely in a sense. I mean, it's very hard to tell. But when there's consistent violence like there has been, particularly in Paris, but in other cities as well, and there's consistent violence like that, you either put it down to agent provocateurs initially kicking things off and setting a violent tone to the protests, and then people continuing it on themselves, or them continually doing it. I mean, but either way, it's not just, obviously, the people who are throwing, battling the police and throwing rocks at the police and throwing whatever at the police are not, they're not all police agents, basically. They're ordinary people who are angry, and obviously the start of this protest was about supposedly a rise in fuel prices. But if you talk to people on the kind of streets and stuff, which we've done, it's not just oil prices. They're kind of fed up. There's a general malaise, and of course, in these kind of protests, the president or the leader of the country is the one who has to resign. That's why you hear all these slogans or shouts of Macron démission, Macron resign, basically.
Yeah.
But I think people are actually not happy with him. I mean, French people, it's not unusual for French people to not be happy with their president.
To be happy with him.
Or to be... Yeah, exactly. It's not unusual for them to be unhappy with him.
Yeah.
They generally speaking... It's bizarre in France. People elect, supposedly, assuming there's no rigged elections and whatnot, assuming democracy still works, at least the votes and the elections are legitimate, let's assume. It's bizarre because French people, generally speaking, elect someone. The majority of French people elect a president, and then, within 6 months, they're out in the streets shouting for him to resign. And that's... almost across the board. I mean, it depends on the scale of the protest, but it's almost like they do it as a matter of... In the past, they've done it as a way to send a signal. They may not necessarily be that annoyed or that unhappy with the new president, but if he just does something that they don't like, then they'll get out and protest just to send a message type thing. They have it in there. It's in their genes almost, or in their blood type thing, where they just feel like, individual kind of social activism and, individual rights, basically, and the rights of the people versus the government. They're basically fundamentally distrustful of government, and they see it as a fundamental right. along with the right to free speech and all that kind of stuff, in France, the right to protest is really high.
Yeah, and to protest
government
riotously.
Yeah, if necessary, you know.
They will erect barricades, block roads and stuff.
But all that said, I think people in France, a lot of people in France we have some questions over the last election, whether it was legitimate or not, whether the vote was actually what they said it was. But I think people in France, generally speaking, many of them, probably a majority, are not happy with Macron. He's not a lefty.
All his official polls rating is like
super low. But the problem is this whole idea of centrism. The countries in Europe and in the US, you know, in the Western world, if you want to call it that, have been divided between left and right for generations. Mm-hmm. There's been lefties and righties, right, for decades and decades. So people are used to that. So somebody takes up a centrist position. You think that you're combining, you know, you're uniting the people, but what you're actually doing is you're not making anybody happy. Because you're not enacting leftist policies and you're not enacting rightist policy. In fact, you're criticizing both of them, or you're being more pro corporations, let's say pro business, which is doesn't make left people happy. And this is Macron. He's pro business and at the same time pro diversity and anti tradition. So he's pissing off both camps. So it's ridiculous to be in the centre. That just means nobody likes you. Mm-hmm. And that's the case. And I think a majority of people in France don't like Macron for that. And they also don't like him because he's this young guy who's just wet behind the ears, very little political experience, comes into, you know, basically is shunted into power. He's someone's kind of front man, you know. Mm-hmm. Someone, obviously, longer established political political bigwigs put him out there and financed his... and in business as well, financed his election campaign a couple of years ago, and he's not doing well for that reason. And at least the French people can see that he's just he doesn't fit the bill.
Yeah,
you know. And there's questions about his sexuality as well, which are kind of as much as
they're too hard to miss.
Yeah, and as much as the French people are generally speaking, you know, let's say a good portion of the French people are not homophobic, whatever, are quite progressive in that respect in terms of, you know, they respect the rights of individuals. The problem with Macron is that he styles himself as a man of the people in this kind of, almost like he wants to be an elder statesman when he's still only 41 or 42 years old. Very little history. And because of his questionable sexuality, and by that I mean he presents himself as a happily married man for many years, but there's good reason to think that he's homosexual, and it's the fact that he's duplicitous about that. Yeah, and it's not, you can't put it down to fear or whatever, in the sense of he's afraid of coming out and admitting it. He may be afraid of it because that may influence people, because maybe French people would be prejudiced in the sense of they maybe don't want someone like him who's a homosexual to represent them or whatever. But certainly in terms of the official narrative and what people would be expected to, the kind of tolerance, the levels of tolerance that French people would be expected to and would expect themselves to adhere to, he should have no fears in that respect. There's the Irish Prime Minister is openly gay. There's who else? There's someone else in Europe.
The former Prime Minister of Luxembourg was openly gay and married to a man when he campaigned and became Prime Minister. So
it's not a problem in that respect. So the fact that he would be being covert and duplicitous about it, not honest about it, basically.
Why hide it?
Why hide it? Yeah. So he's rubbing people the wrong way in that respect. And like I said, he's just not very presidential, you know. He's got this thing where he wants to,
project an image of a fatherly image, really.
A fatherly image or a man of the people type thing, but he thinks he can really connect with the young guys and all that kind of stuff, but he takes it way too far. The
young guys and the old ladies.
Yeah, well, he sullies
everyone. And the kids. The kids.
He discredits the office of the president in France by taking that too far. You're meant to be you can identify with the people or be a man of the people, but you have to remain aloof. You have to maintain what's expected of you as president.
Earn it.
Earn it, but if you think that you have it already, you're meant to show it. But he doesn't show it, and he's a fish out of water in that respect.
He messes up trying to show it. I think he has an idea of what it's supposed to be, but it doesn't jive naturally with what people are.
Yeah, he goes too far.
Yeah.
You know, where he's like, when he was over in Haiti, you know, I mean, you're a president of France. You don't go and a couple of young, kind of dodgy criminal guys with their shirts off, sweaty black guys in Haiti come up to you. You don't give them big hugs and kisses. You know what I mean?
Mm.
I mean, and then actually in that event, it came out afterwards. It was probably known at the time, but it came out afterwards that both of them were actually criminals. They were kind of drug dealers or car thieves or something like that. You know, and he's down there, I think, really pressing the flesh with them.
His press office tried. I think it was a year before those images came out. They tried to not have them go out, and then they somehow got out. So I think there was a year difference between when it happened. Yeah.
No, yeah, they came out not too long ago. Like when was the Haiti hurricane? It was back in.
Oh, that was last year. I think that's why I'm saying that.
This year, no.
The really devastating pair of hurricanes that went through the Caribbean. I think that's when he went.
It was after that, and quite a while afterwards. Like, I'll have to check it, but I think they came out at the time anyway. Because I remember reading about the story, him being there and then seeing the images, you know, and that was seen as a good thing, you know. But so yeah, the French people have every right not to be happy with Macron. He just doesn't cut the right figure type thing of you know, of foreign presence. I mean, that was a problem. Like Hollande before him, this kind of like chubby, kind of like bit feckless, gormless kind of guy. It already started with him, like, you know, because you go back to people have in their mind in France and maybe in other European countries have in their mind the image of like Charles de Gaulle, you know, tall, statesman-like, aloof, all that kind of stuff, you know, and that's what people would prefer in a leader and a president, someone who's better than them, who's obviously better than them, who can even look down his nose at the people to some extent, because you're meant to be higher than us, you're meant to be better than us, you know, you're not meant to be this kind of man of the people who gets in and kind of, you know, rolls around with the locals type thing,
and celebrates in the changing room with all the black boys after the World Cup in Russia.
I mean, it goes a bit
like. And then in the middle of that, it was weird. That was maybe it's got subs now. We should play sometime. So it's in the changing room last July in Russia. They're celebrating champagne, and there's videos taken by the players, and they stop now and then. He stops proceedings now and then to announce to everyone who wants to say something, and he brings in a guy he'd taken with him who's a veteran of French recent military battles in Mali and Central Africa. And he said, "Hey, this is so and so. He lost an arm or a leg or something," and he wanted to say, I can't remember what his message was. It was something like, you know, this is for these guys, you know. So he was trying to be the statesman, talking up and giving a good sheen on France's dodgy military operations in Central Africa, with a room full of African migrants / descendants of.
Right.
And you could see the guys were like, oh, yeah, they were clapping, but you could see their brains kind of went into a semi-catatonic moment where that doesn't fit, dude. Why are you
is this even
doing
appropriate
this now? Okay, yeah. More champagne.
Yeah. Well, that's a good example
of out of touch with
that's
basic social cues.
Right. Or the general atmosphere in the country, the general sentiment of the people in the country. You know, it's like out of sync with that, and not reading the population, not reading how the population feels, you know. But that's a malaise that a lot of European leaders have, you know, and in the West and maybe around the world, that they're very increasingly out of touch with the population, and then the remedies that they apply, you know, okay, I know what you want, I'll do this. And they think they can appease them and tell them with fine words, you know, appease them and make them happy again, make them like them again. But they don't realize that they don't know what people want, basically. They're not listening and they don't care. You know, and it's almost a case of never the twain shall meet, because what those politicians, the level of corruption is so far advanced in European countries and in many countries around the world, that governments can't do what the people want. You would need a complete overhaul of the system, you know. So all they're left with doing is trying to bullshit them. You just try and bullshit the people, and then the people are already primed for your bullshit. They don't like it and they protest more, and it just spirals down, you know. And the only solution would be a complete overhaul of the system, where the whole corrupt clique of them are all booted out of office, you know, or all removed one way or another, and you start again. So I don't know, but yeah, it's they're strange protests in a certain sense in France right now, because the traditional protests in France are organised by the trade unions of one stripe or another for their own, pushing their own issues or their own grievances.
These are organic.
These are supposedly it started with some guy on the internet just saying we should go and protest.
A woman who started a petition at change.org.
Right.
Now at 1 million some signatures. From there, social media spread out. And then people were locally making flyers. And there's no insignia, logo, website, central. It's just locals made their flyers as they saw what they were protesting. It's interesting. The one we got, I wish we kept it because I couldn't show it, but the placards each had a different image of what they were going to be out protesting. And one of them was just the increase in fuel tax. That's already been increased and is due to be again in next month, actually. But another one was the increase in price on cigarettes. But that's something that's never, ever, ever talked about. That's like, that's long dead and buried. We all know smoking's evil now, so we can just keep taxing the shit out of it. It was one of the visual reasons of dissent they were giving ordinary people in rural France why they were going out there. You keep taxing the hell out of us and squeezing us on a whole range of things. Now, so the petition that was originally made was about specifically a fuel tax. But you talk to people and they're being interviewed, it's being fairly it's not being glossed over in the media that there's a general discontent with being squeezed, with people feeling like they have to make a choice between are they going to heat the house this winter or are they going to eat? I mean, if they're on €1,000 a month and half of it's effectively a covert form of income tax, although it's officially sales tax on things, essentials you have to buy. Right. It might be on your utility bills, it might be on your phone bill or internet, it might be whatever, fuel tax. But it's effectively they're being taxed to hell. It may as well be income tax, even though nominally it's non-existent for low-income earners. And then you've got the whole mix of people complaining that while they work for this pittance, which is then squeezed, the minimal amounts, at least for a successful chunk of newly arrived immigrants, maybe from the recent waves or earlier, 10 years ago, whatever, get a lot more in terms of the allowances they're entitled to. That's partly because it's an ideological problem. They're able to game the system more because there's a predisposition in the elites to make this integration work in order not to prevent this kind of social disorder, but the very actions they think they're doing to help the situation is making it worse. And that's why you've got left and right here. This is, if you were looking at this, and I saw an American on Twitter yesterday asking the question, sincerely, I think. He was like, I don't understand yet. Are we looking here at Antifa or a sort of French Proud Boy bunch? Who's doing the rioting here? I need to know if it's left or right. And I responded to him and said, no, dude, this is both and neither. That the kind of polarization isn't present right here in this movement. This is actually organic revolution, in quotes, don't know how far to go, in the sense of a general pushback against the elites in general. There's no particular angle on it yet.
It's pure in that respect. Yeah. It hasn't been adulterated by ideology. Except anti-corruption.
That's actually provided some sort of comic relief in all this because French Prime Minister and the French press all last week were asking, well, who do we talk to? Let's say you've got demands you want to be met. Okay, so lower prices and some other political or economic demands. Who do we talk to discuss this? And the Prime Minister tried to arrange a meeting on Friday, just 2 days ago, with 6 nominated leaders from among the Paris protesters to go meet them. Only 2 showed up, and 1 stormed out after 2 minutes. So, like, I almost feel sorry for the government in what to do about this because there's no one to talk to. They're normal to think the way they're so used to ruling with syndicates and corporations and NGOs then all grouped together under umbrellas makes it nicely organized. But that's how the system became so bloody sclerotic in the first place and corrupted. There's a vested interest of corporations and these powerful NGO umbrellas at this point that keep, including the trade unions, that keeps everything as it is. But you've got the people saying, you all have sailed out over here and we, the people, are left over here, so talk to us. And there's an incomprehension the elites, because like, who are we talking to? You know? And the only thing they do comprehend is now that it has a more violent aspect, at least in the major cities. Now they can understand it. Now Macron can speak as he did while he was in Argentina.
At the G20.
At the G20. Now he can talk about it, and now he has something to engage with because he's familiar. He knows how to deal with it, or his backers do. In French, he said, "Les coupables de ces violences ne veulent pas de changement. Ils veulent le chaos. Ils trahissent les causes qu'ils prétendent servir," which means those responsible for violence don't want change. They want chaos. They betray the causes they pretend to serve.
Oh, yeah, of course he's going to say that.
Well, how is that going to go over? I mean, and in sync with these stronger statements coming from the government about les violences and how this is terrible, we're seeing, probably as a result of explicit instructions, the gendarmes crack down harder and harder with each passing day. And yesterday was the most violent day yet.
Yeah, and today he's talking about imposing martial law. State of emergency, specifically.
Well, that's interesting because France had been under that for 2 years. It was lifted last November, formally. So and the justification for that was the war on terror, right?
Well,
terror
attacks. Yeah. But state of emergency in France, if we've been under one for most of the last 2 years, are we meant to be scared about that? Is that meant to be a threat or something? Ooh, we're so scared.
What does that mean?
That's what we've lived under that for 2 years anyway, and it makes no difference, really. It doesn't. It just means more cops on the streets.
Didn't we hear, was it an anecdote or a quote from an interview in the French press before this protest movement began, concerned the tensions in the big suburbs, I guess, of Paris, which are majority Muslim/migrant populations. And wasn't there some military guy saying, if the shit ever hit the fan, we don't have enough soldiers in this country to handle an actual insurgency in our suburbs.
Right.
Anyway, so that was before. Now we've got this going on. They had 5,000 cops in Paris yesterday, riot police, full gear. How many more have they got available? Because
he's talking about the bringing the army out as well.
Right, might need it. Yesterday, 2 days ago, you've seen this. We can't show, I suppose, because he's speaking in French, but a police union spokesman went on RT France into their studio to say, most of us cops back the gilets jaunes, the yellow vests, because we will be directly affected by any rise in fuel prices. That's the Secretary General of the police union. Most of us can't live where we work because either it's too expensive or we would be arresting our next door neighbors. So we have to drive significant distances. Our tax contributions are going to go up while there's no commensurate rise in our wages. It's hard for us, the police, to accept these cruel measures.
Yeah.
And while he was in there, the interview had already started. While he was in there, he actually took out one of these yellow vests and put it on. I don't know if that was just a rogue couple. Probably not. He's a spokesman, right? He's probably speaking on behalf of, he knows he's got some backing, from colleagues and so on. And he's just sitting there in his studio saying, yeah, by the way, the cops, they're kind of on the fence about this. At the same time, though, the cops are cracking heads, some of them.
Well, what they do in those situations, what the government does is they bring in cops from elsewhere in the country. There's no kind of local identification with either the city or the community standard, or whatever. You bring them in from further afield. That's probably what's happening. That's what the government does, generally speaking. That's what they did in Spain, in the Catalonia independence referendum, when they voted to leave, basically, and the Spanish government said no. The local Catalonia police were basically not inclined to beat heads among the ordinary people for exercising their democratic right to vote for independence. So they brought them in from all over Spain. And hand-picked the ones, let's say, or selected ones who were like very much pro
kicking heads
pro-national sovereignty, if you know what I mean, and anti-independence for Catalonia. So these, you probably can pick, you can vet police officers or you have some idea of certain areas, geographic areas of France, where people are more, let's say, pro-government or an anti-protester type thing, and then use them instead, and they'll be the ones who'll wield the baton with great enthusiasm.
As we know, though, you know what they remind me of? The scenes of Cobblestones Flying yesterday.
The Maidan, yeah.
Remind me of the Maidan. There was an inflection point where even those vetted pro-state, pro-authority figures can go, geez, this is too much. I mean, there were scenes yesterday of gendarmes being picked off as they, pushed and counter-pushed the protesters right under the Arc de Triomphe. I mean, you couldn't have staged it better. I don't know how that happened, but it was partly because they were kettled into that one area by the police, because all the access points around that huge roundabout. I mean, there's cops that were getting isolated from the rest of their pack, getting their heads kicked in. And then some of the other Yellow Vest protesters came over and actually saved them. So it's, I don't know, in a way it's like, yeah, it's another wave of protests. I mean, it reminds me a bit of the Occupy Wall Street in 2011. That's 7 years ago now, at least in the way it began organically. This is a bit different, though, in that it's not just young people. Students only started joining them this week. It's usually working people who've never protested before, and they are really mad as hell. I mean, maybe this is them hamming it up, but on-site reporters for Press TV and RT say they have never seen this kind of violent, this level of suppression of protesters in Europe before. Now, they should have been in Catalonia because it was like that last year. So it's not quite that it's novel, totally novel, but this is maybe a bigger scale, a bigger issue. It's nationwide now, and you're seeing them. You're seeing what. This is the one benefit. It's a benefit. I mean, it's a silver lining in this is that we're all going to now see the real face of the do-gooders who talk a good game about democracy and human rights and the will of the people and what the people want. We're going to see the rubber boot that actually upholds that rhetoric. There was also, I want to show this actually. Can we play this video? It's very brief. We don't even need to hear it, of the snipers. Now, there were rumors that at least one guy had been killed by the police, shot, but I don't think that's the case. Some people were really badly injured. In any event, they had snipers on rooftops around the Arc de Triomphe last night. I mean, they're not messing around like...
Yeah, preparing. They're getting a bit jittery, like the authorities are getting jittery, and they're preparing. That's obviously when you have snipers on rooftops. You're expecting, you maybe like you mentioned earlier, they have Maidan or something in the back of their minds, and that could turn violent by whatever means. Not necessarily. There could be some fifth element group comes in there or whatever and starts a shooting match, and so you take those precautions.
And if they believe half the BS they believe about Russia, they would be braced for a revenge act where Russia would send in snipers and fire both sides and cause a revolution in France. But of course, that would not be the real likely source of it. It would be the fifth element behind the Western power structure. So, yeah, that's
we'll have to wait and see.
I'm still torn between how novel this is, but a few other facts that I think put this in some context. One of the waves of protests under the previous government, Hollande's government, was I can't remember what it was in French, but people were donning a red hat, a bit like the hat of the Revolution, the Marianne hat, and that was a protest, a rise in fuel tax at the time, and I think they successfully got it repealed. Hollande's government said, "All right, we won't increase it at this time." In fact, that measure was likely pushed forward. It's what we're seeing Macron implement with the new government is exactly the same as before. It's an interesting... Okay, so it's just a fuel tax. And they're not really complaining about that. They're complaining about the general squeezing of their finances. But it's interesting that the fuel tax, the reason for why the government wants to implement it is as part of Macron's and previously Hollande's signature program of converting the economy into the future green, carbon neutral economy.
Mm-hmm.
And they haven't tried to hide it. Doing this kind of thing is done with a grand goal of eliminating all petrol and diesel fuel cars from the roads in France by 2040.
Mm-hmm.
As part of the great shift into the beautiful green utopian future.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what being said to people. We're asking you to pay now because otherwise our children would have to pay because the planet will be too heated and we'll all die in some catastrophe in the future. It's amazing because the ideological reasons are always presented in terms of concern for your children and their futures. And people initially go, okay. But when the rubber hits the road and you're asked to pay now while you're already practically destitute, it's like, no. Well, no, we're going to pay, and then we're going to trust that this government is going to use that as declared and reach that goal in a generation from now. There isn't enough trust for such a scheme that's so long term. The basic trust. Remember, this is all the while corruption scandal after corruption scandal exposes that. For example, just 2 years ago, the finance minister of France, the guy who collects the taxes officially, was not paying his taxes and was shunting his funds into Swiss bank accounts. I mean, people are supposed to hear that and go, right, they're corrupt as hell. And now you're asking us to trust that you want to save the planet and thereby save us and our children's future by taxing the hell out of us now.
Yeah.
Sorry, but no, we don't believe you. And so that's what... It's interesting because it left or right, wherever they stand on the issue of global warming and what man can do to fix and save the planet, both see through that as a line of BS because they don't trust those rosy intentions, declarations from a government that wants to create a carbon neutral economy.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to wait and see where it goes. Obviously, it does seem to be slightly different from previous French protest movements, although it will obviously die out at some point. People, when Christmas is coming up, and I'm not sure, I'd be surprised if they keep it going all the way through Christmas, but you never know, I suppose. But I think it will probably die out between now and the end of this month, so until the next time. But I think this may serve as a precedent for future similar protests, because it seems to have galvanized a lot of people and it's got a lot of attention, and people are committed. Like, people are going out and staying out for a long time, all day, sometimes all night, consistently. And so, yeah, I think we're going to see more of it as things probably worsen in terms of the general atmosphere in France and in other European countries as well. People just more and more discontent. This
spread to Brussels on Friday.
Yeah.
Which went straight to burn police cars right in front of the EU buildings in the European headquarters.
Well, it's interesting. It reminds me of a term. I think it was Tom Ridge, used to be the Department of Homeland Security under Bush. I think it's in the Patriot Act, basically, where they mentioned in a list of possible threats to the homeland, they used the term disgruntled citizens. And that's like...
that was the whole bullet point.
10 or 15 years ago, So it suggests, that for a long time, and maybe long before that, governments have had it in their mind that simply, it's not that, it's not terrorism, it's not, people who are, anti-establishments, strongly anti-establishment, anarchists, those kind of people, the usual suspects type thing, radical groups, basically. They include just generally disgruntled citizens, right? Mom and pop, unhappy about something, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. Those people are a threat to the state. And they've known about it for a long time.
Absolutely. Well, it should be hardwired into anyone running for any government position that's what your main concern is. But in part because it represents a threat, a danger to the unitary state you're supposedly about to take the reins of. But not just because you need to keep them down, but because you need to be listening and fairly reciprocal, or reframing how you want to push what you believe is best for the country. There needs to be, you have got, of course, disgruntled citizens should be top of that list. It shouldn't be all the way down here under saving the planet, fighting terrorism, all this, which is all BS. And any real smart, for good or bad reasons, government leader should be aware that, oh yeah, well, that's just the ideology. There's the actual practical concern of, it should be lesson number 1 in how to be a government person in the books they read and then the degrees they have to get and so on. So yeah, it's like, but there's so much BS. Like, I mean, on the day of these yellow vest protests spreading to Brussels, which went straight to riot situation, inside one of those buildings, unless he was in Strasbourg, but I imagine he was inside, Guy Verhofstadt, like ultra-liberal, totally like for full federalization of the European Union, former Prime Minister of Belgium, tweets to announce that the EU has a grand plan by 2050 to make the entire European Union 100% carbon neutral economy, the first in the world, the glorious utopia. And outside, police cars are burning. Like, are you that stupid?
Yeah, well, they are. I mean, wishful thinking and in their own little bubble, paying no attention to the people. The more people respond, angrily towards the government, the more the government flies into denial and concocts increasingly wrong-headed and useless policies to try and solve the problem. It's just you're going to get an increasingly wide gulf, an increasing gulf between the people and their governments, if they keep acting like this, because that's the response. They don't respond rationally to what's going on in the country. They respond with more bullshit. Let's double down on our bullshit, which will piss the people off even more. It's ridiculous. I don't know. It's very frustrating. It's like, what do you say about it? I mean, it's just going to go somewhere bad, and you can see it coming, and there's nothing anybody can do about it. You just have to sit there and watch it and go, and then you get to say, what, I told you so? Yeah, that's great. Like, when all the shit has finally hit the fan, when the fan falls over.
It's not even, you don't even get your I told you so moment, because when the shit hits the fan, everybody knew what was going to happen. Everybody already knew that. Yeah. And they listen to you going, oh, don't you try to claim it. So you're still pushed off for your warning.
Well, they claim they knew it was going to happen.
Because they immediately start to rewrite the narratives in the brain.
They just sleepwalk into it and then...
Oh, it was always so.
It becomes a new reality. Yeah, anyway, we'll wait and see what happens with that. But that's, it's notable for sure as a indicator of a general malaise, like I was saying, in Western society, a general discontentment among a lot of people, largely due to bad government, mismanagement and bad government, and corruption, obviously, massive amounts of corruption. So we'll see. What else are we talking about today?
This Ukrainian provocation at the Kerch Strait. Well, I mean, it's pretty transparent, isn't it?
Crimea River, America.
Well, the entire media says Russia did it, of course, but they love saying Russia did it.
Well, Russia did do it.
Anyone who's thinking, though, knows that it's this was provocation to demonize Russia, in part. That would have been one motivation. It certainly jived nicely with Trump finally having a reason why he could not meet Putin on the sidelines at the G20 in Buenos Aires. Also, I can't go because he's a bad man to Ukrainian Navy. Okay. So to demonize Russia, and of course, the other thing that's coming up are elections in Kiev.
In March.
I don't know why they even pretend. I bet they don't want it. They hate it. They probably just want to institute
Ukrainian Prime Minister
dictatorship.
The Ukrainian Prime Minister Poroshenko has officially a 7% approval rating, which is basically nothing. Zero.
Well, it's
when you're down at 7, you have nothing. 7 was probably just a counting error.
Well, he's a very good Western leader in that respect.
Yeah,
because a lot of them are at that level too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, when you're part of the elite club, then you assess your success or how good a job you're doing by how few people actually in the country that you rule over like you.
Yeah.
The fewer people like you, the better job you're doing, apparently. as far as from the elite club's point of view.
What's my disapproval rating today? It's currently at 93%. Oh, good. I'm doing something right. Yeah. Okay, excellent.
You're in single digits.
At the same time, though, he knows it's trouble. That's why you go to the lengths of doing this kind of provocation.
He's trying to. I mean, it's just jingoistic, right? I mean, it's such a transparent ploy. You know, what do you do? It's like Maggie Thatcher. You know, Maggie Thatcher when she was in 1982, and she she was going to be up for re-election soon, and she wasn't too sure about whether or not she would win another term. She decided to have a war in the Falklands. And lo and behold, a lot of jingoism just spewed out of everywhere. Our boys abroad fighting good war. Yay, England. Yay, patriotism. Oh, who's the most patriotic party? Generally Conservatives. Okay, let's go with them. Let's vote for them. And they vote for them, and Maggie Thatcher wins again. So it's as old as history, basically. What do? Poroshenko's needs some support from the population. He needs to galvanize the population around him. Do we have an enemy? Yes, sir, we have an enemy. You know who it is. It's Russia. They're our enemy, and everybody doesn't like them. At least, you know, that's what we like to think, that everybody hates them. So, well, can we get Russia to attack us in some way and make us look like a victim? And therefore I need to, you know, I don't know, maybe close the borders, you know, implement some strong and stable leadership tactics, whatever. And maybe I'll get, you know, up to 10% approval rating as a result.
And they declared martial law, which in Ukraine I don't even know what that means, because
doesn't mean anything.
They can't do anything. So anything successfully.
Yeah. It's business as usual, right? Martial law. No change, you mean?
Yeah. Status quo.
Yeah.
Right.
So
although he's going around calling for everyone and their army to come over and
bring in the Germans, bring in the French, bring in everybody, whoever, sanctions, you know, attack Russia, do whatever you can to attack Russia.
Russia's not taking any chances, though.
It's obviously a setup.
Bringing in the more S-400s to Crimea.
Yeah, they're obviously taking it seriously, or to show strength or whatever. But yeah, it's hard to know whether they actually think that they would ever need to use those. Who's going to attack? You know, is someone going to attack Russia? Is someone going to attack their ship? What's NATO going to do? Bomb some Russian ships in the Sea of Azov or something? Or bomb some ships in the Black Sea? Bomb Sevastopol maybe? Bomb the Russian naval base in Sevastopol in Crimea? I don't know. But obviously, you have to do it. Basically, you can't not do it. You put it there, but I don't think the chances that anybody realistically believes that you would use it. You know, but the thing about this situation in Crimea is it was there for the taking. It was there to be stage managed. That provocation was there to be done because for the past really since Russia, not long after Russia or Crimea voted to rejoin the Russian Federation, and it became part of Russia. The Ukrainians, obviously, they closed their border. Recently they closed the border. They increased, obviously, checkpoints in the border between Crimea and Ukraine. But recently, after this recent incident, they basically closed the border to to anyone except Ukrainians. Nobody can get into Crimea anymore. You're not allowed in unless you're Ukrainian. But they've also, I don't know how long ago they did this, but it's been quite a while. It's been at least a year. They cut off the water supply. Ukraine cut off the water supply to Crimea. And you can see it actually in maps of the greenery, the greenery of the country, the coverage of plants. The country is like from last year to this year, it's basically all brown, basically, because they're having water shortages.
Having a ration.
Water shortage, yeah, because Crimea has cut it off, you know. And so those are the policies. I mean, you can say the Ukrainians are justified in doing that because Crimea was illegally stolen from them by Russia. But that misses the point that wouldn't have had to happen. Russia wouldn't have had to basically more or less take Crimea, even though the Crimean people voted and were happy to rejoin Russia. It wouldn't have had to have gone that way if the leaders or whoever they are, the clique within Ukraine, did not get together with the US State Department and plan a coup in 2014 that was specifically designed to deny Russia, for broad-scale geopolitical reasons, specifically designed to deny Russia its naval base in Crimea, in Sevastopol. That was the whole point of the Maidan Revolution, the overthrow of Yanukovych and the installation of the State Department, basically. The State Department's chosen, hand-picked people to be the presidents. It was a takeover of Ukraine by the US State Department and to throw Russia out of Ukraine and out of its naval base in Sevastopol and Crimea. no other country in the world would have sat there and taken that. It's a major blow, a major attack on Russian sovereignty and its on Russia itself, on Russia the country. It's a declaration of war. It's an attempt to steal a major military base. Imagine, give me, I don't know, what are the major military bases in the US? I mean, there's obviously...
Well, it's ones abroad. Oh, in the US proper, well...
yeah, effectively in the US proper, because that one in Crimea was...
Fort Worth,
wherever, any of the major US naval bases, let's say naval bases over in California.
Norfolk, Virginia.
Imagine somehow Russia was able to basically deny the US access to one of its own naval bases. It's a declaration of war, effectively, and Russia was fully entitled to do what it did, which was to secure its naval base, which was, indirectly they did that by having a referendum, taking Crimea and having a referendum. And the good thing for Russia was that the majority of people in Crimea wanted to rejoin the Russian Federation. So the Ukrainians have only got themselves to blame for this situation. But they've got... there's sour grapes all over the place as a result. They're crying and complaining. They're just they're pathetic. That junta in Kiev are absolutely pathetic, as all quisling governments are. They're completely discredited and pathetic. And they're crying and they won't shut up about, evil Russia, Russia this, Russia that. They hate Russia, basically. So that leads up to the situation where they decide, well, what can we do? Well, part of the circumstances that led up to this incident in the Kerch Strait was that as a result of Ukrainian antagonism towards Crimea and towards Russia, Russia has been exerting its control in the Sea of Azov and the Kerch Strait by checking all of the boats. That Sea of Azov, they're basically in, just off the Black Sea up into, it borders Ukraine and Russia, a small kind of sea. There are ports along there, Mariupol and stuff, industrial ports belonging to that are Ukrainian. But there's also Russian ports and all that kind of stuff. But Russia, having a bigger military and bigger naval forces, has basically been dominating the transit of ships in and out of that Sea of Azov and to the ports and back, and it has been harassing Ukrainian ships and kind of detaining them and checking them because it's suspicious, and there's every right to be suspicious of the Ukrainians because they've been plotting for the past 4 years, openly and covertly, against Russia. So they're just increasing security. So they've had enough of this. They've had enough of Russian strong-arming us in the Sea of Azov, harassing our ships and our military ships and all that kind of stuff. So they decide to do something about it, which is to, let's make Russia look bad. How can we provoke Russia into taking some action against some of our ships? And then we can say, look, see, Russia did it again. The European Union's probably going to pass more sanctions against Russia for this Ukrainian, the Sea of Azov incident. And Trump, like you mentioned, cancels a meeting with Putin. It's all just to make Russia look bad, and all with connivance, certainly, of the West and of the U.S. State Department and the U.S. deep state.
The backstory to this that I heard was different. I think it's the Russian side. I think it's true as well. We need to check it, but I think there's been a string of incidents in the last couple of years of the Ukrainians illegally boarding Russian ships in the Sea of Azov and taking the captains of merchant vessels in illegally. Well, I think there's, if anything, the pattern is the other way. It's not been the Russians harassing.
I don't know. The thing is, I would leave that open, But what I would say is that, that's two sides of a story, basically. Conflicting accounts, and maybe both of them are true. Who started it? Then you have to get into who started boarding ships. I don't know who started boarding ships. What I'm saying is Russia has every reason to be suspicious of Ukraine because it is effectively a U.S.
Absolutely.
government outpost on its borders, and it. There's obviously the issue in Donbass and, the war taking over there. And Russia has every reason to be. Them taking Ukraine, the U.S. State Department taking Ukraine is pretty much the same as the progress of NATO up to Russia's borders over the past, since the end of the Cold War, where when the U.S. promised they wouldn't do that, then they go ahead and start pushing into Poland, into Romania, into Bulgaria, into the Baltic states and all that kind of stuff. They start pushing towards Russia and setting up missile systems in those areas. And this coup in Ukraine was simply another way to do exactly the same thing, to push right up to Russia's border and take Ukraine away from Russia, take it out of its sphere of influence and, surround Russia effectively with U.S. military apparatus. So, on balance, obviously, Russia has every reason to do whatever it thinks necessary to protect its own interests because it's being threatened.
Yeah,
it has been being threatened for the past 10 years, actively, in very direct ways. by a power that is attempting and would love to see Russia destroyed.
Yeah.
What would you do?
What set this off last week was that there's an existing arrangement.
Yeah, they share the sea.
They share the sea, and all it is that, and this predates the Maidan coup.
Right.
If you're passing through the Kerch Strait, you just notify, say who you are, fine, and off you go. In this case, they were radio silent, and once they were radio silent on their approach, that's when the Russians sent out ships.
Yeah.
And then they tried to communicate directly ship to ship, no response.
Right.
Then they rammed. Then the Ukrainians started doing these crazy maneuvers, which we all saw. Then they rammed them and brought them in. So it was a change in the normal procedure as agreed between the two countries that predates the Maidan.
Yeah.
Which doesn't conflict with your general point.
Yeah.
But on the specific legal laws of the sea,
the
Russians are in the right here.
They were violating an agreement, yeah. But, well, they also shot at the Russian at the Ukrainian ship.
Yeah.
They put a hole in it.
Yeah.
And but the weird thing about it, what I still don't understand about it is what...
That's because they were armed, those ships.
Yeah, but they're two glorified dinghies with machine guns on the front.
Yeah.
There's two 50 caliber machine guns on the front, and they're little small Corvette type ships.
American ships.
Not very
given
big.
to Ukraine a couple of years ago.
Right. Well, and two of them constitute, I think, a third of the Ukrainian Navy. So I think they have 7 or 8 total, or 6. The Ukraine has no navy, so these two little dinky ships, sure, grey gunmetal warship looking things, but all they've got basically is 2 machine guns, a machine gun on the front of it, right? Probably 50 caliber machine gun. But the weird thing is, there's 2 of them, and yes, allowing for all this kind of radio silence and not responding to instructions or not responding to requests is a provocation and would alarm the Russians. But what I don't really understand still how it got to the point where it got so chaotic and the Russians essentially took the bait. Because if this was a provocation, Russia has a history of not taking that bait that comes in the form of provocations by Western powers. It's well used to it. It knows it knows the way they do those kind of things, and it doesn't take the bait because it knows that when it takes the bait, that's what they want you to do, so that you'll respond in a certain way. And now we've got you. Now you've done something wrong. Now we can demonize you. So what I don't really understand is why Russia went to the point of firing on those Ukrainian ships, because, like I said, they're 2 dinky little ships, not really any threat to the Russian military forces, or Russian military and air force and naval forces in the region. And also, what the hell was the tug doing? It was like 2 dinky naval ships were escorting a tug. What the hell was the tug doing there? What's the backstory there? What were they doing? Why a tug? Why would two naval ships be escorting a tug, or be in the company of a tugboat?
And you found a possible clue, although it's not being discussed by the Russians, not yet. I
don't know if that's true or not.
Well,
there was a story earlier on this year, basically, that in was it Newsweek or no, the Washington Examiner, by some pundit who said the US or Ukraine, he said Ukraine, but it really meant the US. Obviously, Ukraine can't do anything without the help of the US. That they should blow up the new bridge, the Kerch bridge that Russia built at great cost over the past couple of years and opened earlier this year.
Which is pretty much where this
joins Russia to Crimea. Yeah,
which is where this went down.
Right. So I'm not saying that there's anything necessarily going on, but I can understand how the Russian government and the Russian military would be very nervous about that bridge, and would not be trusting the Ukrainians,
especially after all the acts of. I suppose they fall under acts of war, but really acts of terrorism they've conducted in the last couple of years, assassinating in car bombs and other explosive devices. Leaders of the Donbass rebellion,
right?
Among others, there have been assassinations of Russian journalists in Ukraine, of course.
Right, infiltration into what are supposedly Russian areas. I mean, Donbass is effectively a Russian-aligned area, but somehow someone was able to get in there and plant that bomb to blow up. What do you call him? Zakharchenko. So you can't be too careful, basically, in this kind of situation when dealing with an enemy as insidious and as duplicitous and Machiavellian as the Americans in league with their Ukrainian nutjob partners, who are just hysterically anti-Russian. Who knows what they do? So it would, to a certain extent, it might drive you to distraction and make you a bit antsy. So maybe that's the solution, or the answer to the question as to why the Russians respond in this way, because they're just not taking any shit from the Ukrainians at all.
Yeah,
we're beyond the point. We're not going to second guess you. You know, we're not going to wait and see. We're not going to believe what you say. We're not going to necessarily assume that you're acting in an honourable manner. We're going to actively assume that you're up to something. And as soon as you step out of line, you're getting smacked.
And we don't mind the resulting media campaign making us look like...
Right, because you've been doing that for the past 5 years anyway, right?
Yeah.
Putin killed my baby, you shot down MH17, you hacked our elections, you hacked Brexit, you hacked the Spanish referendum, you turned Macron homosexual, you... pretty much everything, right? So at this point, once they've levelled so many accusations against you, it doesn't matter, dude. Say whatever you want. I'm tired of it at this point. I'll just carry on doing what I have to do, and you can rant and rave in your stupid media.
It was just reminded me, if the Yellow Vest protests continue in France, Russia will be blamed for it. Mark my words. You heard it here first, people. Russia did it. Remember the movie Hunt for Red October?
Yeah.
Great movie. But the storyline is...
dodgy.
I never liked it. It never sat right that, you know, an American naval submarine is going to save a Russian one, but only because it wants to defect. So now they're right thinking, they're on our side. But all right, we'll give them that. Okay. There's another big movie, submarine blockbuster out called Hunter Killer. The premise of which is... Putin was asked what he thought about it. I doubt he's watched the movie, but I think he was given the gist of it by a reporter and asked what he thought. The plot is an American submarine docks at a Russian Arctic base after rescuing a Russian president from captivity, preventing a military coup and averting World War III. So Putin told reporters... Listen, we just had 2 small US boats donated to Ukraine, which could not pass the Kerch Strait, and you want a nuclear sub to enter our base? This is a highly unlikely scenario, surreal. And he was laughing, like, that was a good answer. I was wondering, you know, what does Russia do now? Well, they don't need to do anything. No. I mean, Putin just said what you said, but in fewer words. He said, the problem with Ukraine is it's run by a party of war. Donbass. Crimea, its own people. It's war. It's what can you do about such people? There was one response, though, a little asymmetrical. Later last week, Russia announced that henceforth, anyone wishing to pass through the Northern Sea route, which necessarily in the Arctic, which takes you, of course, close to Russia's shoreline, will from now on have to notify the Russian authorities. So no more sneaky passages through. It's basically, okay, look, if you can do that, I can do this. You know? So that was kind of an asymmetrical response.
Right.
And then the question, what does Russia do with those boats it has now? Maybe they can give them to Norway. I hear they're in need of a boat.
Yeah.
That way you can recycle NATO vessels, you know. Save the planet. A bit. Yeah.
Recycling. Good. All right. What else are we talking about today?
A few updates on Russiagate. Oh, God. First, earlier in the week, The Guardian published a bombshell report. Saying that Paul Manafort, who very briefly, of course, headed Trump's campaign in 2016, had secret meetings with WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange.
Except he didn't.
And it was dismantled hour by hour all through last week, such that The Guardian, the author of it, Luke Harding, was backtracking fast. And they were rewriting the article. It was apparently changing in real time as it was easily proven to be a lie.
It's bizarre how they're...
One of the backtracking was that they said that, listen, if the story turns out to be untrue, it'll likely be because false information was fed to the Guardian by Russian operatives.
What a bunch of idiots! Like, I mean, if you can say that in advance, then don't run the story.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you have to run the story because it furthers this ridiculous bullshit nothing burger story of Russia collusion, Russiagate, blah blah. They hacked our election, which is all people don't understand that all of it is a lie. There is no substance to that whatsoever. But it's well, we know we're in a post-truth age where, truth is irrelevant.
Facts are fluid.
It's just you make it up as you go along and you put it out there as the truth, as facts, as just the facts, ma'am. Impartial reporting by the Guardian or by the BBC. When it's not, it's complete, and a vast majority of it is complete and utter lies. Unless, like I keep saying, it's a story about a cat was caught up a tree today. Then you can rely on the BBC. If there was a cat rescued up a tree by firefighters, okay, there's a decent chance that was true. Anything about politics, Russia, international politics, it's all partially or completely false, and it's all opinion is the problem. People think it's not opinion. Yeah. People separate their websites. These reputable news organizations supposedly separate their websites between just factual news and opinion, and put here's our opinion piece, which so opinion piece, and so that's just our opinion. You don't have to assume it's true or whatever, but obviously they argue strongly for it, and people believe opinions as well, as much as they believe facts, especially when it's coming from an authority. So the idea that they put an opinion and think that, well, nobody's really going to believe this. No, they know people are going to read the opinion and go, yeah, that sounds really true. I'm going to take that as fact. There's no difference between fact and opinion these days, and even when they're reporting the facts are by definition slanted and presented in such a way that they are imbued with bias. Because you can take facts and cherry pick facts and leave out certain facts, leave out historical facts, and you can claim, I'm still only reporting the facts. No, but you've cherry picked the facts, you put them in a certain context, and therefore it's bias and opinion. So all of the reporting by Western mainstream media outlets is opinion. And it's massively biased opinion. Not only massively biased, but hystericized opinion.
Yeah.
I mean, look at it. When you get to the point where they can report it as fact about Russiagate, about collusion, when they've got to the point now where
it happened, now we just need to sort out what the consequences are.
Or what the specific details are, but we all know it's true. Mm-hmm. We all know that Russia hacked the American presidential elections. No, they didn't at all.
And they have the gall to call us fake news. Then, later in the week, the Cohen perjury.
It's more nonsense. Perjury,
insane.
What?
Well,
he lied to the FBI because he said that Trump didn't have any business interests in Russia leading up to and during his campaign.
Yeah.
He lied to the FBI because why? Because the whole Russiagate bullshit was already out there and he didn't want to make it sound any worse. So he didn't want to feed the beast, basically. Yeah. So he didn't say anything. But the fact that Trump had some kind of construction...
He wanted to build a Trump Tower in the heart of Moscow.
Right. What does that mean? What? And what? That makes him Russian? Does that make him Does that mean he's best buddies with Putin? They're trying to do, they're trying to
catch them out, and assuming that what Cohen has now said is the truth, and therefore what he had said last year about this is therefore perjury, technically, because he spoke to 2 congressional committees about this last year. The only issue is, when did it end? When did Trump's interest in building a Trump Tower in Moscow end? Now, almost certainly, I can already predict what's going to happen. It ended sharply the day they went Russiagate on Trump, which was probably June. Was it late June 2016 when Clinton first voiced it? They had Steele working on it, on the dossier with GPS Fusion. And then once that went out, it was like, oh, fuck, and if they ever ask you, Cohen, just say it ended, just backdate it, and here's some paperwork. And that should have been it. Because what they called him out in a lying is not a lie, it's technically it's untrue, but they've only caught him out because they're trying to show that they were interested in getting a Trump Tower right when Russiagate started. It's probably such a nothing burger.
That process went on for probably was going on for a long time. You know, planning permission, looking for sites, and all that kind of stuff. So, but
Trump has said flat out that Cohen's lying this time about when they dropped any interest in having a Trump Tower in Moscow. But he's looking bad, or it's easy for them to make him look bad because at the same time he's saying, well, anyway, I could do whatever I liked while I was still a candidate. I can have business interest anywhere, which is also true. And it is a weird, I mean, it's just in itself, it's a weird coincidence that he was interested in getting a Trump Tower in Moscow, still while campaigning. Although, of course, it's totally innocent on his behalf because Russia hasn't been mentioned yet. That only comes in a few months before the actual election.
Well, what's interesting is the way that it's framed. Obviously, when Trump, before Trump was president, him having business interests anywhere in the world was irrelevant. It was standard, par for the course for any businessman who builds buildings or whatever around the world. Right? No big deal. But then when you establish a fact, a bullshit fact, a false fact that Trump and Putin are in bed together, then, and only then, does Trump wanting to build a Trump Tower in Moscow become suddenly, what if that means he has leverage over him? What if there were dealings going on? What if Trump promised him that he would give him access to our government or something in exchange for building his tower? But those people never stopped it and questioned the premise that they start out with, which is that Trump and Putin are in bed together. And there's no evidence for that at all, whatsoever. The whole thing's just gone so far that it's ridiculous. It's a big, massive... It's a circus, you know? It's a freak show made up of absolutely nothing but complete and utter horseshit.
Yeah. One of the ironies here is that Trump did actually get Cohen to contact the Kremlin directly while campaigning to inquire about the possibility of building a Trump Tower. Dmitry Peskov in Argentina just now responded to this and reminded everyone listening to his answer that he'd already stated this in an interview with CNN last year. For some reason, it didn't get blown up as a big thing then. But anyway, he repeated what he had said last year. Peskov reiterated what he told CNN in August 2017. And this time, he read out the email that Cohen had sent him, or landed in somewhere in the Kremlin inbox. Dear Mr. Peskov, over the past few months I've been working with a company based in Russia regarding the development of the Trump Tower Moscow project. Without getting into specifics, the communication between our two parties stalled. As this project is too important, I'm hereby requesting your assistance. I respectfully request somebody, preferably you, contact me, blah, blah, blah. Let's arrange a meeting. The thing, and Peskov pointed out, listen, that's maybe how things are done in America. You can just, if you're rich enough, you can just call the White House and get a sneak planning permission, maybe a brown envelope. That may be how you do things over there. But in Russia, you don't call a freaking Kremlin and say, yeah, so I want to build a skyscraper. So Peskov said that he told the reporters now what they had told Cohen back then, which was, you kind of need to contact the Moscow
planning,
the regular authorities. I don't know.
Authorities.
Yeah, and he reminded, the Kremlin receives dozens of these kinds of requests every day, all of which usually are outside the administration's competence. Peskov also said that he told Cohen in his response that, so the presidential administration of the Russian Federation isn't into construction. However, if you're really eager to invest, you could always come along to the Economic Forum in St. Petersburg next year. It's insane. The only reason, so not only is this not new, it's not news because all of this was already out in the public domain last year. It's only new news because of the announcement that Cohen has technically perjured himself because what he said to the committees this week differs slightly from what he had told them a whole year ago.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, he lied. Therefore, they're hiding something. Therefore, this old news that, yes, they had contacted the Kremlin about building a Trump Tower is presented as if it's brand new and it's lock stock, oh, they've got it down. The Washington Post ran a headline yesterday. Trump should be freaked out right about now. But there isn't actually any news. There's no actual new development in that. It's reconstituted. Someone barfed it back up and they're eating it again. It's like, it's beyond insane. It's completely nuts. Meanwhile, it is connected, of course. There's a headline like also Friday, FBI raids home of whistleblower who had dirt on Clinton Foundation and Robert Mueller. Again, there's actually nothing new to what happened here. It's been given a kind of retrospective aura of being a new discovery and the government's cracking down. Therefore, there's dirt behind it that people are hiding. So the issue in question is 2 weeks previously, they kept it under wraps, but it was only announced this week. A dozen FBI agents raided the house of a contractor who had given Congress and the DOJ documents about the Clinton Foundation and the Uranium One scandal, which implicated then FBI Director Robert Mueller.
Mm-hmm.
The FBI agents turned up at his door in Maryland, demanding to see the documents that this guy, whose name is Nathan Kane, had already turned over to the Department of Justice, Inspector General, and the House and Senate Intelligence Committee. Not only that, but the FBI didn't even try to contact him about the things he was blowing the whistle on beforehand. There was just radio silence. The first contact is a raid on his door, even though he had said, "This is where I live. It's public information. I work here." But they're concocting the appearance of we got one of the moles, implying that there's dirt behind this. But it's a complete reverse. This is the guy who's blowing the whistle on the Clinton Foundation and her connections to Russian businessmen and the Uranium One scandal, which implicate Robert Mueller, the very guy who's investigating Russiagate to find the dirt on Trump. The dirt's all on Mueller, the guy who's doing the investigating. This is like the Warren Commission. I mean, where Alan Dulles is sitting there at the head of the committee investigating his own freaking crime.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's the extent of it, basically. Pretty sad. Don't know how we expect anything to go right or make any sense. Where that's essentially the way the discourse is pursued. Yeah. So what else? There's not much else going on, really. Is there Brexit? Oh, Brexit. Oh my God.
We mentioned the G20.
G20.
Did you notice how as soon as they arrived, there was an earthquake?
Yeah. Small one.
Small, 3.8 magnitude, but it was pretty close to the city proper, Buenos Aires, 30 kilometers out. The strongest in that region since the 1980s.
Yeah. Brexit,
the G20. It's so weird,
Or sorry, G20, yeah, go ahead. No, I don't think there's much to say about G20, is there?
It drives me. It's bizarre.
Just
you watch world leaders assemble for family photos where they smile and wave, and at the same time are either culpable or very close to those who are culpable for actively pursuing extraordinary geopolitical events that would ordinarily maybe provoke wars that have historically. I mean, there was a time when a letter written in offense somebody, caused wars, where an affair over a woman caused a war. And these days they do gunboat issues like what we just saw, the Kerch Strait, and okay, there was no war, and there's not likely to be one, of course, because everyone in the end is too invested in keeping the whole show going. But they all like backstabbing each other in the most heinous ways. And of course, the one who got most of the bad press because he literally still had blood in his hands was MBS.
Yeah. Yeah, we have a picture of Putin meeting MBS. Putin got obviously a bit of flack for high-fiving, more or less high-fiving MBS.
That's a bro five, they call it.
A bro fiving MBS. But look at the orange man in the background there, you know. I mean, not that was just him coming into the room, you know.
Orange man not happy.
But that image kind of, there's an awful lot. You could write a big long article about current geopolitical history and modern geopolitics on that image. You know what I mean? How it led up to today, and on what's behind that, what's going on. You know,
a lot of people have.
Yeah. But the G20 that they're at there is, you just mentioned it, like them smiles and shaking hands and then at the same time kind of stabbing each other in the back once they leave type thing. It's kind of like, and you mentioned it's like playing happy families, you know, it's a family gathering. It's
they call it the family photo.
Right, it's the family photo, yeah. So, but it's like a bunch of highly narcissistic, you know, malignantly narcissistic family members. I don't know if anybody listening has ever been to that kind of a gathering where the majority of people at a family gathering are all raging narcissists, and just watch how they all interact. And you know what's going on behind the scenes, you know, and you watch how they interact. Pretty much what the G20 is. Raging narcissists get together and, you know, live it up and talk shit about each other and then go home and try and plot each other's downfall. That's the world we live in.
What do you what do you think of what can be said about that high-fiving between Putin and MBS?
Putin and MBS. It's just I mean, it's realpolitik, right? It's the Russian term, realpolitik. And
did he go out of his way to do the opposite to what everyone else is having to act, you know, angry and not impressed and disappointed with MBS?
No, I think he's not gonna. Putin isn't so false, and he's not going to, you know, make a show of things. Because of course, like, you know, the Brits and the French and all that kind of stuff show their apparent displeasure with Saudi Arabia over the killing of Khashoggi, you know, and talk about sanctions. But behind it, they couldn't give a shit. They do not care one moment. All of that's just for the press and for the people to kind of like make people think that they hold the moral high ground when they're all in the gutter, basically. Putin, on the other hand, by that image, it seems to me that Putin and MBS actually like each other, actually get on well. And that's why there's that kind of greeting. But Putin's not going to like pretend to be annoyed or pretend that he thinks that extrajudicial killing of a citizen by a government is something unusual.
Mm-hmm.
Only naive people think that hasn't gone on for decades and doesn't go on all the time. And the other person who speaks truth about that is Trump, who said in response, he took flack for, you know, not being strong enough in his condemnation of MBS over Khashoggi. And Trump said, well, listen, if we hold everyone
to that
standard, we won't. If we hold all our allies to that standard, we won't have any allies. Which is true, because pretty much all, you know, major, highly developed democracies and the best governments, the most free and democratic governments in the world, all of them engage in killing, extrajudicially killing their own citizens and citizens of other countries.
Yeah. And emphasis also, on other citizens in other countries, duh. But even the sticking point is on their own political business. I mean, obviously, like Seth Rich, probably that Hastings guy,
right?
The UK, Pat Finucane, human rights lawyer.
We'll go back to. There's loads of people in the US, a lot of less notable. Well, what do you call him? Gary Webb. There's a bunch of people. Yeah. Lesser known people. Who were just in the way.
Everyone knows Khashoggi because
all the time, because he's supposedly some kind of freedom fighter, which was completely not a horseshit. He wasn't. He was as big a jihadi supporter as anybody else in Saudi Arabia. He's like supposedly a Washington Times correspondent. No, he wasn't. He wrote about 6 articles for the Washington Times. That makes him a freedom fighter journalist. Washington Post. That makes him a freedom fighting, you know, lover of democracy. No, that's whole history before that.
And he was
hanging out with Bin Laden and the jihadis in the 80s. In Afghanistan.
While he was writing these democracy-sounding "I love human rights" articles for the Washington Post, he was writing for Arab-speaking newspapers saying
exact
opposite. Like, you know, we just need to reform Islam a bit, you know, but we're not touching the monarchy. By the way, Israel's evil, which you would never say in the States, you know. Just one thing I want to mention. The whole article is just like, what planet does he live on? Some highbrow writing for CNN. Headline: The astounding Putin MBS high five. It really pissed people off. Like, I think what pissed them off was the freedom these two felt they had to do that when they weren't conforming to a behavior they're supposed to. No, you're both bad boys. You can't.
Narrative, yeah.
You look too free and sovereign, and that irks me.
You should have big glum looks in your faces, like you've done something wrong. You're both bad boys. You should look like bad boys. Go and sit in the corner.
Go and sit in the corner. Yeah. Well, this guy Julian Zelizer, professor of history at Princeton University, big op-ed in CNN on this. The astounding Putin MBS high five. I swear to God, he wrote, "It is as if Gilded Age corruption has reached the global stage."
Only
the
now.
implication
only
being
now.
It never was before. It's as if the petty crimes of the commoners has entered our hallowed ranks among the elites, who are pure and would never deign to do, never mind consider such horrible acts. I mean, who are you fucking kidding? Anyway.
Bunch of freaking pedophiles.
And what about Macron? His tete-a-tete with MBS. What a contrast.
Yeah, he was trying to schmooze him. You know, I'm your bro. You never listen to me. You're a very naughty boy. Maybe I should give you a spanking. Yeah, you wish, Macron. That's the kind of the thing. That's the feels he was giving MBS. You know.
MBS didn't look like he was enjoying that.
Don't worry, Macron. Don't worry. Macron, who knows what he was talking about? He was caught on tape, like talking to MBS, saying he was worried, concerned about something, and that he never listens to Macron and stuff. And it's like, yeah, join the club. Nobody else listens to Macron either. But he was probably just making a show of being, you know, being an authority.
I'm there for you if you need someone to talk to.
And
yeah,
I'm important. Macron's whole presence is going around trying to impress on people how important he is, and he looks like the least important person in the room, especially that wife of his. But anyway,
I've one piece of solid data about what actually an outcome of the G20 was. Headline last night: Russia and Saudi Arabia agreed to renew oil output cuts. That was announced by Putin in his press conference. That's a renewal of an agreement they made back in September. It's a rolling kind of 3-month agreement where they basically agreed to, keep the supply tighter, and they hope that will raise oil prices, I suppose, which has now fallen down to $50 or something, $50 a barrel.
Yeah, oil prices have fallen $50 a barrel, but the French people are protesting high oil prices.
Yeah, because of taxes. The taxes is 60+%, and
right.
The taxes to be increased in January.
Well, but it's also tied to the price of oil as well.
I think that's what kind of scares them about this handshake. Saudi Arabia and Russia are working in concert regarding oil. I mean, the only reason, the ultimate central core strategic reason for Saudi Arabia being such a key ally is, of course, the petrodollar. It's the kind of oil spigot for the planet in terms of the availability of its oil. Yeah. So Putin's saying to the press, we are going to work together with Saudi Arabia. We're going to survey together the market situation and respond to it operationally. That's, if we were to explain why it's like kryptonite seeing them do the high five. Yeah. That's probably the gist of it, the core of it.
Mm. The power is slipping from America's grasp. It's not good. It's causing all sorts of turmoil around the world because, you know, we more or less live in an American empire, so it can't but affect many places in the world, you know. The whole global economy and global politics and stuff is going to be affected as America continues to lose its position, progressively lose power and lose influence around the world. It's not going to be pretty. But we've said that many times before anyway. What's our last topic today?
Well, on a final note, we say farewell to George Bush Sr.
Yes.
Who departed this mortal coil yesterday.
There's a quote by someone, I don't know who it is, don't know who the person is, but the quote is, I've never killed a man, but I've often taken great pleasure in some people's obituaries.
And this would be one of them.
No, I wouldn't even grace him with taking a lot of pleasure. He's I prefer him to be consigned to the dustbin of history. That's what annoys me about about the media eulogizing him and stuff. You know, oh, he's a wonderful man. You know, left, right, every shade of mainstream outlet doesn't matter. You know, all the supposedly lefty anti-war papers and stuff like that, just loving up on him because what? Because I mean, if you're responsible for the deaths of thousands of people, that's the defining characteristic of you. That's the defining point of your history of your life.
There's nothing you can do
that's airbrushed entirely.
Yeah.
The one thing that's a defining aspect of George Bush Senior's life is airbrushed out of all of the talk, all of the obituaries, and the eulogizing of him. That's just sickening. But we've seen it so many times before. John McCain, you know, is Donald Rumsfeld dead yet?
No.
Well, all of them and
Cheney might be next.
Cheney, he'll get
Kissinger.
it as well. You know, Kissinger. Brzezinski, he got it.
He got it, yeah.
He's wonderful, lovely guy. It's sad, but whatever. It just discredits the media even more, which is a good thing.
We have a short video of W Senior, HW, speaking in 1988. So this would have been when he was campaigning to become president after serving 2 terms as vice president. I should give you the backstory. He's being asked about the downing of an Iranian airliner. Almost 300 people were killed when the US accidentally shot down a civilian aircraft, Iranian. That's all but airbrush from history. You never hear about that in the context of provocations or Iran being bad or terrorism. And they just went, sorry, oops, well, it was a mistake, but you know, you can't be too sure.
Exceptional, Stan.
Can we play it? This very short.
Of America. Ever. I'll never apologize for the United States of America. Ever. I don't care what the facts are. I'll never apologize for the United States of America.
I don't care what the facts are. You see, facts for these people have always been alternative, fluid, put in scare quotes, facts. Don't bother me with your facts. Do you know who I am?
We create reality.
Yeah.
Facts are irrelevant. We make them up as we go along and make them real. The only last thing I'll just mention about is Brexit. There's not much to mention about it other than it's just trundling along like the giant farce that it is. You know, people just losing their lunch over it on an increasing basis every day because it's just so nauseating. Nothing has changed. If May's deal is approved by Parliament on the 11th of December, there will be no Brexit. The UK will be locked into the customs union as they have been as a member of the EU. They'll be locked into it for foreseeable future. Nothing substantial will change. So May's Brexit is not Brexit at all. It's got nothing to do with Brexit. It's a farce. It's a con. Not that I'm for or against Brexit. It's irrelevant. I'm just saying what the facts are is that what the people in the UK voted for, they are not getting it, and the British government under May is trying to convince people that this is the best you can get, when actually what she's saying is the best you can get is not what you actually voted for at all. No change in our status effectively with the European Union, and all of the things that people voting for Brexit wanted to get in terms of the control they wanted to get back over their own sovereignty, their own immigration policy. They don't get any of that. They're still a member of the EU. That's why most people are saying that she's not going to get this deal passed in Parliament. And if that happens, she will be removed. There'll be a no confidence vote in her as leader. She will be removed as leader of the party. Someone else will try and become the Prime Minister. Will there be a vote for a new leader of the Conservative Party and therefore a new Prime Minister? But at that point, it seems that there'll be a lot of calls for another referendum.
Before another election.
Right, because it'll be the fact that it's such a horrible farce will have become so transparent to everybody that the only sensible thing to do is to try again. Although I'm not sure that will happen. Are you
implying then that the only sensible thing to do, should a referendum be called, would be for people to vote to stay?
No, I think it might be closer. Who knows if they could rig the election? I don't know what way that would go. I think a majority of people in the UK still want to leave the EU.
Mm-hmm.
So if they have another referendum and if it's a fair election, they would just get the same result and then they'd be back at square one. and then it would be the task of the new Conservative Party leader and Prime Minister to negotiate another bullshit Brexit deal that doesn't give them Brexit, because, like I've been saying all along, there is no possibility that the UK can actually leave the EU. From an economic point of view, it can't happen, and economics trumps everything else. So Brexit was never a possibility from an economic point of view. So they should just give it up. It's not happening. The band's not going to make it. It's not happening. But they're going through the motions, because in the middle of all that, you've got these power plays. You've got personal will to power, individual politicians wanting to increase their status, increase their influence, and become prime minister or whatever. But of course, the only thing that would, it's not going to change it really. The Brexit, the vote, the referendum is a problem that won't go away. But there can be many changes in amongst that. One is obviously, I think that May's time obviously is numbered. Her time as prime minister is numbered, but also the Conservative Party might be numbered. Their days in power might be numbered, because there may be a snap general election called as well. First, and then Labour might gain power in the UK, and then they would maybe have to decide whether to have another referendum or negotiate a new Labour deal for Brexit, which would be no different than the one the Conservatives negotiated. You see what a load of crap it is.
This future sounds exciting.
Yeah, it just sounds like a bunch of monkeys. It's sad, and it's been going on for 2 years. It's pathetic. Anyway, yeah, we'll have to wait and see. But that's on December the 11th. Nothing will happen until then, when they have their vote in Parliament, and see what happens. It's been a slow enough week, and that's interesting that it's slow enough week. If you look back at what actually happened in another era, that would have been a week of major news.
Right.
But in the current era of massive corruption and fecklessness and outrageousness and lies and nonsense, masquerading as truth and sanity.
There's so much of it. It's kind of become like white noise. It's hard to say which stands out as more newsworthy than the next, because it's a constant white noise.
The new normal of fecklessness and corruption and lies, and you just get used to it. It becomes the new normal, so you don't react to it anymore. You go, oh, look, another apparently major issue happened there where someone said something outrageous or something. But because if it's all bullshit, if it's all so confused and so stupid, that it's not that it's not a major event, but rather people have been numbed to those big issues, or a breaking news event, because they don't believe it anymore. So they just turn off. You just walk away from it. You just go, whatever, You keep shouting, screaming things at me, like this is what you want me to be really want me to get worked up about, and I'm like, I'm done. Like, my nervous system is it's wrecked. I'm sorry, I'm walking away. Yeah, it's almost like a Pavlovian dog response. Shocks have been coming so fast and so consistent for the past few years. People are just like, what? Trump what? Trump has a tattoo of the Russian flag on his arse? Oh. Wow. Yeah, anyway. But we're not apathetic, we're just really... Does it seem as apathetic? Being apathetic and being tired of it, it's the same thing. But it's not always that. Sometimes something comes along that's actually interesting. At least you can kind of talk about it and you can kind of figure things out a little bit more clearly, although these days it seems to be just more of the same. Sometimes an event comes along where it really kind of like exposes what we've been saying for so long as really being true, and we kind of maybe get a bit excited about that, but it's not every week that you have that kind of thing, If you like this video, you know what to do. Like it, subscribe, click on buttons, etc., because that's good.
Don't do too much of that, though, because it's not good for your health. After you've done that, close the computer, go do something else.
Yeah,
right? Just
exactly.
Something with your hands, anything.
Exactly. Go and build something, yeah. So we'll be back next week with another show. We hope you enjoyed this one. Until then, have a good evening.
See you next week. Bye, everyone.